In this video, we're going to be looking at how teams are formed, and specifically how agile teams are formed. We're going to be looking at the different types of skills that we'd expect to see inside of teams. We'll be looking at the size of teams inside of agile projects. We're also going to look at a number of different models that exist to explain how teams are formed and the different ways that teams operate together. And we'll be looking at how teams can actually be designed to make team members feel empowered, which again is one of the more important aspects of agile working. So let's start off by looking at the different sorts of skills that we're expecting teams to have. And when we're building teams, the different sort of ideas that we need to think about when we're putting them together. The main purpose of a team is to try and take requirements, or the main purpose of a software development team is to try and take software requirements, user stories, and create working, usable software from this. With this in mind, the skills in a team should really be kind of optimized to do this kind of work. Okay, it doesn't mean that every single person in the team should have the exact same set of skills, but it means that members of the team should have complementary skills. You might have one person that's brilliant at front-end development, another person that's brilliant at back-end development, another person that's brilliant at database development, and another person that's brilliant at understanding customer requirements and user experience development. It also doesn't mean that you should just focus on these things. Inside of an agile team, we're really expecting team members to be cross-functional. We are expecting people to be experts in their own individual areas and to know what their own expertise is, but we're also expecting competencies in other areas. Okay? So you want to be a master in one area, but then also have the skills to be able to look at other areas and to provide an insight into them as well. So even though you might be an expert in front-end development, it would also be useful if you had an idea about how the design of information is actually sent across, to maybe have a little bit of an understanding of information architecture. So this idea of technical skills is something that is vitally important, but also these cross-functional skills are things that you need to make sure that you understand where you sit with this as well. The idea of cross-functional skills helps agile teams a lot because it does help with having this idea of joint ownership. If you only had your mastery skills, you might think, well, the front-end person is only responsible for that, the back-end person is only responsible for that. Within agile teams, we're really focusing on this cross-functional nature of skills, so the front-end is owned by the team, the back-end is owned by the team. And it also helps when it comes to estimating things, because if you only rely on the experts, they'll be saying, 2 days, 1 day, 1 day. That person might go off for one reason, and all of a sudden you're left with just the competent people. All of a sudden it becomes a little bit more challenging. So when someone says this is going to take 3 units of effort, it really is up to the team to say, well, why? If 7 of us are saying that this is going to take 7 units of effort and one person is saying it's going to take 1 unit of effort, why is that the case? And also, when we're thinking about when we're picking stories to do, we aren't picking stories for individuals to do. We're picking stories for the team to do. We're picking stories that the team is going to be committed in doing. So the team has to have these cross-functional skills in place so that they can understand, well, when we're picking this, here's all of the things that we need to think about. We need to think about the back end, the front end, what the customers are going to be looking at, how it's going to be implemented, how this is going to impact on our server architecture. One person isn't going to be able to think about all of that. It's a team responsibility to pull all of these things together. Another thing in teams that's worth looking at is the interpersonal skills of team members. We are expecting team members to be able to collaborate with each other. We're expecting you to be able to actively listen to each other. We're expecting you to be transparent. So if things aren't going well, you really need to be able to say they aren't going well and just be comfortable in saying that as well. This idea of open communication is something that is vitally important within agile teams. It's also important to try and understand about different sorts of conflict management skills, so how you're able to approach a conflict situation and how you can resolve these, how you can start to use negotiation as a way to start to help with these sorts of things. If someone is coming in with issues and one person thinks that something should happen one way and another person thinks that something should happen another way, how are you going to negotiate to make sure that you're coming to the best outcome possible? You also want to make sure that you've got diversity in your teams. You want to make sure that you're embracing lots of different types of ideas, and also that you're adaptable and flexible, that you're able to see outside of a blinkered vision approach and see the wider picture of what's happening. And also within agile teams, because we are dealing with fast moving environments, changing requirements, you need to be very, very flexible and to be able to deal with ambiguity. We don't really know what the end result is going to be, but we know that we're going to get there. Okay? We don't need to care about what the end result is going to be at this point in time. We need to care about these things we're doing. Again, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So the last thing here is that we really want all of the members in the team to be aligned to the goal of the project, to the purpose of the project. There's no point in having people inside of a team if they're just going to be drifting along and not really caring about it. They're of no use, to be honest. They're just going to hold up and use up time. So if you do have people like this in your team, you need to figure out, well, how are we going to be dealing with this? To be honest, the easiest way that you can deal with team members in a project that aren't pulling their weight is to give them tasks that you wouldn't view as mission critical, okay? I would never give someone a task on a project if they weren't pulling their weight that was vital to the project actually being accomplished, okay? I'd maybe give them a few of the delighter type things that we talked about before. Something that the project doesn't really need to have, and if it gets implemented, it's great, but it's not something that has to happen. Certainly wouldn't put them in charge of server setup, certainly wouldn't put them in charge of making the database work. Anything that has to happen, these basic things from the Kano model, would not put them on that, okay? Give them the coulds from the Moscow model. That's the best bit of advice for that. The next thing we need to think about in terms of our teams is the size of these teams. So the ideal size for a Scrum team is between 7 with a plus or minus 2, so from a 5 to 9. For this module, I've said between 6 and 8 because it works out really well with the number of students we have in the class, but this is normally what we'd expect to see in our group. Ideally, you would have all of these people co-located in the same space. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes that isn't. And ideally, with teams of this size, it means that you can limit how long your daily Scrum meetings are going to be to round about 15 minutes. If you have too little people in the team, the meetings will be too short, people won't see the value in attending. If you've got too many people in the team meetings are going to be too long, it'll take up way too much time in the working day. Okay. Also, the smaller that you have as a team, the more likely you're going to have of every member of the team wanting to contribute. With big teams, you get to the stage where it's only the loudest voice that's heard. With smaller teams, everyone is more easily able to contribute to activities like brainstorming. With large teams, you get quite a lot of that background noise happening. So with that in mind, it's worth trying to understand a little bit about how teams are actually formed and the different steps that teams go through. Now, by master's level or third year, depending on where you are when you're taking this module, you've probably been a part of a number of team projects. And you've probably faced a number of different challenges along the way. The Tuckman model is one of the models that's been created that tries to give a bit of an understanding about how teams form and how they perform. And it looks at different stages. It uses the forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning idea, and then looks at how performance in a team changes throughout these 5 different stages in a group. Okay, let's have a look at each of these individually. So we're going to look at this in terms of team performance. Normally, when a team first forms, this is when they come together and they're more focused on themselves, their roles, their responsibilities, instead of the goals of the team, okay? The alphas are trying to come out, okay? People are like, I'm going to make sure everyone knows I'm the best one, okay? This is what happens in the forming stage. After a while, though, things kind of go a bit pear-shaped. And in the storming stage, this is where people start to work on things. And people start to bring out their individual attitudes, they bring their opinions, and they try to dominate the situation, okay? During this time of team projects, you're going to get a lot of conflict, you're going to get a lot of disagreement, and this could vary in intensity. Some of these conflicts could be positive, okay? It could be things like, actually, we shouldn't be doing it this way. We should be doing it this way because we'd be able to improve upon X, Y, and Z. But a few could be destructive and demotivating, and it could make team members feel like they don't want to participate anymore. However, this is just one of the stages. Teams do get through this, and you get to the stage of norming. And during this stage, this is really where the team is working at its best, okay? Supervisors could come in and set ground rules. Within Agile, you'd hope that the team themselves can set the ground rules and emphasize what the type of behaviors are that you're expecting to see. Team members are trying to resolve their conflicts, they're trying to forgive and forget, and they're trying to get on with the goals of the project rather than the goals of the individual. And setting up these norms and these ground rules, especially when times are tough, this can really help, especially when we've got multiple locations happening. Okay, so these co-located projects with people working remotely, setting up ground rules here really works well. Okay. After this norming stage is where we get to the performing stage, and this is like the nirvana. Teams are motivated, they're ready to work, and they're ready to achieve the goals of a project. They're aware of each other's strengths, of each other's weaknesses, and they look to complement each other's work. This one is probably the most difficult for teams to reach, especially within smaller projects, because you don't get a time to build up the relationships that you have with others. Some teams actually never reach this kind of nirvana performing area, because it can be quite difficult to reach. And every single time that you're bringing in new members of the team or that a project changes, the Tuckman model suggests that we do slightly go back to the forming stage again. Finally, in the adjourning stage of the project, sometimes this is called the morning stage as well, the project is over and the team members are finished. You're released from your work. The adjourning stage normally starts with like a slight increase of work as these final deadlines are appearing, but then things start to tail off at the end. Some project members might leave, some project members might go on to other things, okay? People the reason we call it the morning stage is because you're meant to be sad that you're no longer working with these people again. Some people might be happy that they're no longer working with these people again either. So we can see with this that we've got these different stages in a project then. Hopefully, you'll be able to use this sort of model to try and understand how your past experiences of being in a team have been. Some of you will have definitely experienced the forming and the storming and some of the norming. You might not have experienced the performing, and you've definitely experienced the adjourning. Okay, it's worth thinking about how you can actually go through these stages, and if there's any activities as a team that you can do to help you in actually moving through these. And as an extra thing for this module, it might be worth looking online for Tuckman model digital activities that you can carry out as a team in order to help you work more effectively together, especially during this forming and storming stage. Okay, you want to find a way that you can do positive storming exercises. So another way that we can think about teams and the way that we can think about people's level of ability in teams is through looking at something that's called the Dreyfus model of skills acquisition. And this is really used to assess the progress of skills within or skills development within a team and how proficient individuals are at different types of activities. We can use this to rank different abilities of individual members or the team as a whole from a novice all the way through to expert. And it's worth looking at this model as a way to start to understand a little bit more about how individual people work. For example, if we look at expert, what we're doing here is we're saying, well, this person is now at a stage where they are very, very proficient in a given task. They go beyond the guidelines and the expectations of what's given, and they make their own interpretations of this, which are better. Compare this with the novice, where there's a very shallow understanding of what's happening. You're always going to need this close supervision. You're always going to need clear instructions, probably from someone that's competent or proficient, and you're only going to be able to follow things mechanically. Okay? Think about when a child is learning to build things with Lego for the first time. They're following the instructions one by one by one. By the time you get to the expert stage, you don't need the instructions. You're able to see Lego blocks for what they are and can make pretty much anything you want with them. So we can use this Dreyfus model to start to understand different people's abilities in a team and to look and say, well, for front-end development, I am an advanced beginner. For back-end development using X, Y, and Z, I'm an expert. Using these sorts of things, you can start to give people a better understanding for where your skills lie in a project and for where your contributions are better to be. The last thing that we really want to look at is this idea of team empowerment, because within Agile teams, the team really should feel empowered to get on with the work. Agile teams will never be told, we want you to do something this way. The decision making is delegated to the team, okay? You might be told, we want you to do this, but how you're going to do it is really down to you as a team and how you work together. in order to accomplish this, Agile leaders really kind of stand back and don't do this kind of micromanagement, command and control style thing. They really kind of follow this servant leadership type approach, where their job is more to intervene and help anytime that people are struggling within a team because they need an extra bit of resource, okay? The idea here is that if you're empowering people, you're beginning to build up this level of trust, okay, an individual commitment to the project itself. And this is something that's vitally, vitally important inside of Agile teams. You really want Agile teams to support each other, to support the decisions that are made by product owners. You want them to work through consensus. You don't just want one person to be the one that says, we're going to go off and do things in a particular way. You really want to be able to set the expectations and then let people live up to those expectations. And you really want teams themselves to be able to set the velocity for the work that they're wanting to do. I am not going to comment on the amount of work that you do. I'm going to comment on the processes that you follow, okay? Your velocity could be extremely low or extremely high. It's really up to you, okay? I'm really cared about the processes that are going on here and the fact that you as individuals are able to carry out a project. And we really want you to own the project and own the problems that you're able to solve as part of this. And that is all about forming teams. Okay, hopefully that's helped you in trying to understand the different types of skills that we'd expect different team members to have, and also the different sort of stages that teams go through anytime that they're coming together and then finally kind of carrying out a project.